Welcome to OOO, an out of ordinary podcast where we dig deep into case studies and the nitty gritty of Web3 marketing. You'll find here all the amazing people that are building Web3, so stick to us as we address their marketing secrets and learn how to build amazing products and brands. Something you mentioned to me is that, I quote, founders and brands in Web3 are going through an identity crisis. And I think we've seen this quite recently with what happened with Ledger. They had a pretty bad PR situation. And as we were talking at the beginning of the episode, Twitter was not easy on them. Why do you think this identity crisis is happening? And how do you think we can fix this in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a lot of opinions on this, but I think in fact, I mentioned, I think earlier today, I was actually looking interestingly yesterday, and I posted a piece on Hacker Noon about this about a year ago, and I saw Gabby Goldberg had posted. I think I saw Ryan Selkis had retweeted. She posted something on Twitter. I think it was like a screenshot of a message, but it was, and again, we've kind of already touched on this a little bit, but how crypto companies fall into like two categories, and one is so native consumer businesses, and one is more focused on like traditional consumer businesses or traditional audiences, where there's elements of Web3, elements of blockchain technology that have been incorporated or can be incorporated into what their project is to like improve user experience, or again, specifically on the financial side, obviously faster payments, whatever. And first of all, I'll touch back on why that's relevant here, but I read that and I was like, that is exactly what's going on, because she wrote that there's these two types of businesses, and the issue that we have in this space is that we often conflate the two. And I think the whole kind of identity crisis piece falls exactly down to that. I think there's two pieces why, or two elements as to why a lot of brands in Web3 have an identity crisis. And it feels a bit harsh to say identity crisis, but it is kind of true. I think on the one hand, you have a lot of projects, and this is where we're maybe coming out of this phase gradually and slowly. But I think as we mature as an industry, we're kind of moving on from this phase. But we have a lot of projects that have been born from, you know, a very like tech heavy idea. They've been born from product first, from either a developer or, you know, anyone working specifically on product. They've solved a problem with a solution, and they've built a company and a brand. Well, they've built a company out of that, and they've built a product out of that. And because of the size of the industry and the fact that we have been in infancy and there have been problems that needed solving, that product has been adopted and it's been used in the space. And then they have seen the adoption of their product scale. And because it has been born, you know, from initiated from this idea that often a developer has had, there hasn't been much blessing on the branding side, right? There hasn't really been a marketing person often, or really anything in a lot of projects in Web3 on just the commercial or business side. That often is a bit of an afterthought, because a project becomes a business because of its success. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we probably need some comms. Oh, we probably need like some BD. We probably need to think about partnerships. We probably need to do this. And so that side of the business starts to build once the product has already hit the market. And as a result, I think that and again, it's kind of similar to what we were saying earlier about the way we position products in the industry. We often talk about the feature set. We talk about like the speed. We talk about different aspects of the DevX, whereas we don't really talk about the impact that has on the customer. And because we're such a product-led industry, I think a lot of brands in the space where the brand has become the afterthought, it just hasn't really been nurtured the way perhaps other business models have been built. And as a result, we see so many brands in the space that they have their name, they have their offering, they have their audience, and they often have a massive disconnect between actually building like the purpose, vision, mission statements for the longevity of the brand, and really to just exist beyond the realms of what this product is today over the next 5-10 years as a business and as a brand. And I think, what happened with Ledger at the start of last year with the launching of their account recovery, I think that potentially was something kind of aligned with this, where, and again, similar to what Gabby Goldberg wrote, they put this new feature in the market which spoke to one audience, but they announced and launched it to another audience. They announced and launched it to their legacy audience, traditional hardware users. And this feature did not speak to traditional hardware users. There was also, I think, a bit of a grey area in the comms and how they'd maybe previously positioned Ledger hardware to what was now being kind of announced. But I think one of the biggest issues that, and again, it's the mob with the pitchforks came out, right? Everyone, like, people were burning their ledgers. People were like recording, driving over their ledgers in their trucks. And I think that a lot of that could have been alleviated with how it was rolled out to market. It was this feature that did not speak to the crypto native audience, was positioned to the crypto native audience. And actually the people that it did speak to, who would have been like my mum, your mum, there didn't seem to be like a massive approach to really focus on that onboarding. Whereas actually account recovery, it is a feature that we want to offer to really make the user experience in Web3 easier for new people and newcomers, not necessarily for people that traditionally use Ledger hardware, Ledger core wallets. So I think that was, where Gabby wrote about conflating those two audiences. I think that was massively to do with that. And I think the reason that we conflate the two audiences is because we actually don't know who our audience is. We don't know who we're building for half the time, because we've just built this thing and then we're like, oh, it's Web3. So let's do it for the Web3 audience. But actually, you might have a product that is not for like Web3 native audiences, and it is for the wider market, or vice versa. You might have a product that speaks to the Web3 speaks to the more niche Web3 audiences, or is specifically within a vertical within Web3, and we're just kind of like doolally like marketing across the space at the moment. And I think when you're within Web3 and you have a product, again, we traditionally focus on like crypto Twitter as a whole to market our products. And I think a lot of brands have not had the opportunity to really just sit at the drawing board and think about who their brand is. If they were to personify their brand as a person, who is that brand? Who are their friends? Who do they go to the pub and drink with? Have a pint on a Friday afternoon? What kind of jokes do they make? What kind of conversations do they have? Do they like talking about politics? Do they like talking about television? Really building that persona around your brand, to understand who your brand is, understand who your audience is, understand what your tone of voice should be, understand all of that and who you're speaking to, and just really be tuned in to have this human connection to who you're marketing your product to, who you're building for. I think that because we've scaled so quickly, I think that a lot of products and brands have missed that opportunity so far. And I do think it's something that, again, as we're evolving and maturing as an industry, I think companies are growing, and that will change. But yeah, I think we're still definitely going through that process. And again, I think with the way that Gabby Goldberg put it on Twitter the other day just embodied that perfectly for me. We've still got a long way to go, I think.
Something else I wanted to add here is that actually there are two things. One is that many times, like I speak to people or like founders, when I ask them like, who's your target audience? They tell me Web3 native people, which majority of them are men. But I feel like they don't exactly know who are these people. So that's one. It's exactly what you were saying. And two, I think like most times, especially looking at like JDs or like companies hiring, for example, I think many times they're not really looking for communication managers. I know sometimes in 2022 people were looking for like brand managers or like partnerships managers, but then they only got like maybe like growth or maybe some community managers of some sort just to make sure that they can grow their community, let's say. So I think that's why many companies are facing this identity crisis, if you want to call it like this. I know it's a bit harsh to say it this way, but I think that's the reason, because like scaling and not having a strong fundament of like who you are, like what you're transmitting messages on, is a bit can be very shaky and can come with repercussions like long term. But that's my opinion about it. I feel very strongly about it. I've been complaining about it on social media quite a lot, so anybody that's following me knows about it. But to kind of tap into like what you were mentioning, like what do you think? Because all these many companies don't know exactly who the target audience is. Like, what do you think can be done from a marketing perspective to get closer to this audience and to basically be able to like build this connection with who they want their users to be?
Yeah, I think as well it's the sad reason that like a lot of projects have ceased to exist or not really in the space anymore. I know that I've worked with people who are building something else now from a project that they've been building historically, because they have come to that conclusion eventually after really investing in something, to discover that there isn't really a market fit for them. There isn't, I think even on the wallet side particularly, there is a really tough fight there. And again, you could argue like smart accounts. We actually did we've been kind of doing some, looking at some data points at WalletConnect recently, and a really interesting find that we've kind of come across is to do with smart accounts, and a couple of questions raised about like where, who are smart accounts for? And if they are for that particular audience, then where is the onboarding and the education around that for that audience? Where is the awareness? Are we tapping into that audience with smart accounts? Has the understanding of smart accounts really broken out of like the building space in Web3 yet? There's a lot that, again, certain things were like, oh, maybe there should have been a thought kind of earlier on for certain areas. But I think the key thing on the marketing front, particularly, I mean, first off is just if you're building a project, you should be building something with a product market fit. You should be building something that, either you've experienced the pain point and you've realized there's a need for this product in the space, or I guess pretty much something along those lines or similarly to that. We should be building for purpose. We should be building tools knowing that there is a market for it, knowing that there are consumers that need this thing that you're building. That will make it a hell of a lot easier, first off, to market and position anything in the space. And again, we found that with Web3 Inbox, which was really nice. Just to see the traction and see the like instant use of the tool. But I think for marketers, when there is a product already in the space that you've launched, that you're working on, that you're taking to market, and you're continually trying to grow and scale, I think the key thing is to just really tune in to social listening, really. And it's not a glamorous task, but build out your user personas, understand your existing users as well. Why do they use your product? I think there's a lack of that quite often as well. You do speak to projects sometimes where I've never interviewed users or never done a survey, and they don't actually have a lot of data or understanding of their existing users, the people that are keeping them afloat. And I think
these are some I'm sorry to interrupt, but these are some basic stuff that any startup or any product person, any founder should do at the beginning of things, right? It's not something that Web3 invented.
No, exactly. And I think it's done early on, but I think there's so many projects that are still around and they're going through the growing pains of, okay, we had this initial bout of growth and now we need to fundraise soon, and we don't have many numbers to show for the last 2 quarters or whatever. I think there's a lot of projects that have maybe done that had that initial kind of spark in terms of building the project, but then as they've grown and scaled the company, there is the element missing, and they've maybe disconnected from who they're building for, what they're building. I think partly maybe the reason that happens in Web3 is because it is a fierce market. You are battling for the same audience. It's not often that you have an entirely unique product. There is often competitors that you have in the space, and it is a small market that you're positioning to, particularly if you are marketing to Web3 natives. So I think there's this element of just building quickly, add more features on. Our competitor did that. Okay, we need to do this. And even again on the marketing front, and I think we'll see a lot with Forecaster, which is a great tool for marketers in Web3. If you're not trying to use Forecaster and you are a B2B product or brand in Web3, then you need to start doing that, because the builders are there. It's a great space to really try and connect with builders. But again, there's a lot of kind of trend hopping that will occur where all of a sudden, and I think all marketers are guilty of doing this every now and again, where you see your competitors doing something, so you have to do it. And then, maybe you will see results, maybe you won't, but you will get to a point after where you realize you neglected or you deprioritized kind of a deeper rooted project that you were thinking of doing that's, again, less glamorous and less vanity metrics coming from it, to do this thing that your competitors are doing. So you had to do it. And all of a sudden you realize that you weren't actually prioritizing your specific audience. And you were molding your product and your offering to fit this, mold that you all of a sudden in a reactive way decided that you have to do. And I think there's a lot of, because we are moving so quickly as an industry and things are changing all the time, I think there's a lot of neglect sometimes, or deprioritization of the less glamorous stuff and the groundwork. When you're building user personas, if your product changes, your user personas might change. And again, if not, if your product changes, if you have new feature sets, new users, you need to be interviewing them again. You need to be understanding, you need to be in tune with exactly who your audience is. And again, like you said, my audience is Web3 males, 24 to 45. Who is that? Who is that? There's so many people in the space for so many different reasons. And they will not all be using the same products. They will not all be interested in your product. You need to have your niche locked in. You need to know what your niche is. You need to know exactly what, the product market fit is, or at least know what you think the product market fit is. You need to know who the audience that you're targeting is. You need to know who the audience that you're actually attracting is, because it's not always the audience that you're targeting. And you might need to pivot sometimes or rethink how you're structuring things if you do have a product market fit that's not the one that you thought it was. And you need to constantly be beating that drum. You can't just think, oh, we did that in Q1 this year, so we don't need to do it again. You cannot lose sense of what you're building and who you're building it for. The who you're building it for is constantly important. And I think the other key piece is just knowing who they are and where they are. Again, we all use crypto Twitter. We all do PR. We all are probably testing Farcaster, but there's just elements of knowing who you're speaking to in all of that you have to constantly beat the drum and remember. And I've found this myself over the last year or two as well, with like having so much output across a few different projects, also freelancing and working with certain projects as a contractor. A classic error that's often made is just, oh, we did this thing, write a blog, launch a blog. And then I found with so many projects coming in and being like, oh, what's the readership? What are the numbers on that blog? And like, no one's reading it. Why are you building that content? Why are we doing this? We should be doing blogs. Everyone should be doing blogs, but think about the blog that you're writing. Think about who you're writing it for. Do you have an SEO strategy? Are you just writing a weekly blog to meet a quota? If you are and you're not getting the numbers, then rethink how you're doing that, because you could spend that time so much better. You could be spending that time, sitting on Farcaster for an hour a day and testing out this really new and quickly scaling, changing space where if you aren't there, you might miss a beat and you'll start writing a blog that no one's going to read. So I think it's just thinking about prioritizing everything that you do for the outcome. And if that means minimizing output, do it, because you won't see the number. You'll see better numbers.
All right, let's take a quick break and introduce you to a game changer in the lead generation arena, Dealfront. Now, we all know the struggle of identifying those elusive websites visitors and turning them into valuable leads. But what if I told you there's a tool that not only promises but delivers on supercharging your lead generation and sales efforts? Imagine having the power to identify companies visiting your website, track their behavior in real time, and seamlessly integrate it all with your CRM. Dealfront is not just a tool, it's your secret weapon for efficient and targeted lead engagement. So what sets it apart? Its revenue engine is fueled by live European data in multiple languages, providing you with insights and access that other tools simply can't match. No more struggling to find the right decision makers. With Dealfront, it's as easy as a few clicks. Here's the magic. With Dealfront, you can harness 3 layers of data: market signals, web visitors, and EU company databases. And there's no need to worry about compliance. Dealfront meets Europe's strict standards, ensuring GDPR compliance competitors simply can't match. Ready to revolutionize your approach to leads and deals? Grab your free demo today at dealfront.com. That's DEALFRONT.com. Don't miss out on the future of successful deal making with Dealfront. I think it's also a matter of like how founders like treat the situation, right? And like what kind of marketing people they get in the team, because I feel like especially with like early stage tech startups, the founder always has an opinion, always has an idea, always has a direction. So sometimes like you as a marketing person, you're being like pushed around and then you're like, oh, but the results are not there. I'm like, well, the results first will take time to be built and to figure out exactly what's happening here with your product, because like a marketing person is not building your product, you're building a product, your developers are, your product person is, you're just like helping it enhance it or like grow it. So I feel like it's a lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding of a marketing person's role there many times. And something else I wanted to add, like regarding like branding and positioning, because you were mentioning that and your target audience and the niche and so on. I was recently looking to launch my course, and I was looking for different types of products, so Teachable, Coursera, and so on. And I was absolutely shocked to see these are like huge companies in the space, right? Like everybody knows about them, but the user experience was one of the worst I've ever had with a product in my life. And I was like, how is this possible? Like for such big companies and like so renowned companies in the space to have such a bad user experience. And I think this kind of translates quite well into like what could be happening into Web3 as well. And that was kind of a conclusion that I kind of got to lately, is that no matter how, like, who is your competitor, like how big they are and so on, you can always find something that's a pain point and you can make it better. So I think that should be a lesson for many companies in the space, because I think there's so much room for improvement, so much room to build things right, especially right now. So that's kind of one of the things that I'm most excited about, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I again, I have a lot of opinions on this. I think I won't name names. I had a similar experience last week, where a very popular tool in the space, on their like connect wallet function, it's really, really limited. You can actually only connect one of two wallet options, which I don't use either. So I couldn't complete the action that I was trying to do. And it's great. That is crazy to me. That is anyone's user experience in the space, but this popular product user experience. And I think a part of it is probably that certain brands have got there first, right? They've built this product when there's been a massive piece of the market share for them to take, and they've taken it, and people still use it regardless of what the experience is. They don't necessarily feel the need to
Improve
it, yeah. But I think it's a huge mistake. I think my history repeats itself. You have the Ask Jeeves, right? There's a reason that we use Google and we don't use Ask Jeeves. MySpace, I mean, I loved MySpace, but nobody wants to be the MySpace of Web3. And it will happen to certain projects if they don't evolve and they don't tune into the demand of the market. And I think that's where we're at. I think today, there are a lot of products that can still pass for that and still have the market share, even though they are not expanding, growing, evolving their user experience. But if they don't do that, then I think someone else will take that market share, because the option's there to build it. So yeah.
100%. Like, what are some what is some advice that you have for companies entering the Web3 space when it comes to user acquisition and maybe retention as well? I know for sure that's a huge issue.
Which, retention or acquisition?
Both.
Yeah. I think there's a marketing piece, right? But there's also, build something people want, obviously. I do think, and I think we're coming out of this a little bit as well, where you're seeing a lot of the same product being launched time and time again in the space. I do think we're seeing less of that. So anyone launching today, I think if you have a strong product, and you know who the audience is, you know who you're rolling it out for, I think a massive, massive piece again is the product positioning and taking it to market for that specific audience. But I think for acquisition, focusing on the channels, and doing a lot of testing as well on these channels. Like we test with paid, but we also test the messaging that we use on paid, and we never stop testing that. We're constantly trying to improve and A/B. And if you're not doing that, then you should be. But I think testing platforms and seeing where, provided you know who your audience is and you know who you're targeting and you're really listening to who they are and seeing who's starting to adopt your product and, finding, tuning in to those audiences and where they live. I think that's key. I know one project in the space that pretty much has one marketing strategy. They don't really use organic channels. They use one paid channel a lot, and they do pretty well. They hit their numbers. They're succeeding. This is obviously for acquisition, but they've picked one thing and they do it well, and they keep iterating and they keep testing on it. They're not spreading themselves thinly across every channel. I think, we still get lots of projects that are on LinkedIn. I'm sure some projects have their audiences on LinkedIn. We're not close to LinkedIn. We do use LinkedIn as well, but we certainly don't give it the same prioritization as other organic channels. And I think pick one thing and do it well. It doesn't have to be one thing, but just know what your channels are and that they are the channels that your audiences live in for your acquisition. Definitely test other things, but just have a clear strategy on where you're targeting and who you're targeting. I think for retention, the key thing again is just listening. I think a few projects in the space often have a bit of a disconnect between product and marketing. I've worked with organizations in the past that marketing is blind to user data once users are onboarded. And there's actually, been limited data. It's not because there's not been communication. The data's not been there because whoever's, kind of built out the product, of course, they haven't had to think about what the marketing team needs and what data we might want in terms of retention. So it's there raw, but there's no kind of dashboard, there's no preset, there's nothing for the marketing team to go in and say, even on this is where our customers are dropping off. This is where we need to change the UX comms. This is where we need to change the UI, because that is essentially a piece of marketing as well. And also understanding okay, are our users using this product 5 times a week, once a month? What days specifically are they using it? Is it a DeFi product? Are they using it the day after payday? Really listening to what your audience is doing and being hyper aware of the people that are the reason your product is still alive today, and tuning into that. And again, is it a DeFi product? Are users more active after payday? Okay, do we have some sort of incentive around payday? Do we have some sort of activation? And again, even just beating that drum in everything you do. If you're writing blogs that aren't working, blogs aren't an acquisition tool unless you are using SEO or you have a great organic strategy, or you might use them for paid. But blog on its own, when you hit the publish button, it's not going to do very much for you unless you have an underlying strategy for that blog. And the same for retention. Have just understanding that user journey and what your customers want and need. And a big thing for us as well, that we've been looking at recently, is just the user journey. And again, our customers are developers, but in Web3, you have read the docs as a CTA, you have try the demo as a CTA, you have get in touch, you have get started. Just understanding what users actually need from first, and this is retention and acquisition, right? You have a new feature or a new product come out that existing customers can use. Understanding what hand-holding they need throughout that process. Consumers are pretty lazy. And also we shouldn't be expecting consumers to do all of the hard work. We should be doing it for them if we want them to use something. Just being completely tuned into what users need throughout that process. And again, testing it, A/B test your CTAs, understand what's working and what isn't. If you don't know what's working, if you don't know what's bringing in the results, which I do think a shocking amount of projects actually don't, in the space, then that's where you're going wrong. And I think the biggest error a lot of marketers make, or people hiring marketers, is thinking that marketing isn't a data-driven role. It is completely data-oriented. If you're not looking at data as a marketer, then you really should start.
I think the biggest problem is not that marketing is not, or like the perception is that marketing is not related to numbers. I think the biggest mistake in the perception is that marketing is going to fix everything,
Yeah.
which is not. What are some growth tactics you think you're seeing in 2024? Or like, what are you most excited about?
Ooh. I think the use of, as we were talking about earlier, with like the crossover of different platforms and tools, and using interoperability as a marketer, which I think is probably pretty closely aligned with partnerships, which isn't new to 2024. Partnerships has been the backbone of a lot of marketing in Web3 for a fair piece of time. But I think as we're seeing more projects surface that have these different use cases, as we were talking about earlier, and by default kind of enable these new ways to connect and communicate, and like new ways of interoperability across platforms. I think as a marketer, finding a way to utilize that and leverage partnerships, and just not switch platforms or switch tooling or switch strategies, but finding a way to bring different elements of different projects and different products into your own strategy, I think will be huge. I'm really excited about the piece that we're doing in Denver. I guess we can chat after about how things go. But I think just finding a way and just keeping up with the times and changes, again, with like the whole craze that's gone on with frames recently. It's been a massive opportunity. We hosted a frames hackathon in Lisbon this weekend. It's been a massive opportunity for B2B brands in the space to really engage developers again, and also kind of showcase that, like, or remind people or let people know that, like, you are up to date as a product. You're not sleeping on this. You are actually as in tuned with the developer community as they are with each other. And I think that also speaks for B2C, maybe not specifically as much with the frames example, but just in terms of like new products, utility. I think the way that Zora has partnered with so many projects over the past year, it's become a bit of a trend to kind of have a celebratory or commemorative NFT piece on like certain platforms. I know Zora's done it with a few. We've done it with Transient Labs and Sovereign Nature. I think just finding ways to really incorporate partnerships and different projects and different elements of Web3 within what you're doing, that's the key. That's a massive, massive key, I think, to growth.
Could be. What are some other success stories that you know from Web3 and you think should be shared?
Oh,
Do you have an example that comes to your mind right away?
I mean, I think again, it's a lot of it is to do with partnerships and projects kind of teaming up and working collectively to bring things to the market. But I think I don't know if you saw the campaign, again, an IRL campaign last year in Istanbul with the chipped nails.
Was it Gossip Protocol or was it something else? I think like they're having. I'm hearing about like two projects. I spoke with the founder of Gossip Protocol. I actually met somebody from Shify. I was in Lisbon at that time, but we met at the Web Summit. and I saw like she had like a bigger nail, like
Mhm.
it was like much bigger compared to like her other nails. Initially, I was like, "What is this girl doing?" But then I was like, "Oh my god, it's chipped."
Yeah, it probably was, I'm sure. Yeah, it's Gossip Protocol. And I think the way, I mean, I wasn't in Istanbul, but I saw plenty of kind of the news and everything in circulation and the hype around it on crypto Twitter. But the way that like encapsulated the audience in Istanbul was brilliant. I saw as well like a lot of, and it's what I really liked about it was that it broke the norms of kind of what you can do, like what you're allowed to do in Web3 to really like activate the audience. Like traditionally, you wouldn't launch stick on nails to a Web3 audience. You would know, your audience is Web3, 24 to 45 male. You'd be terrified to try and do something like that in this space. But I remember one thing I was seeing was like a ton of guys with like super shaved down or like filed down like NFC nails from Chipped at Istanbul, and it really just tapped into the whole market. No one really cared about. I mean, people cared about the aesthetics in a positive sentiment, but no one did in a negative sentiment. And it was kind of like, among a massive audience in Istanbul, it was kind of like the prevalent thing that I kept seeing on crypto Twitter. And I think the founder herself, made a few comments about how like the elements put together is not like this entirely new thing invented on the spot on this occasion. It's something that has been done before, I think, and can be done by anyone else. But it's the way that it was brought to market and the way that it was brought to Istanbul and the way that it was positioned within the space that, again, it was just so fresh to see something like that. And it's not something that you come across very often. And I think what I liked about it as well was being at the intercept, or being the crossover between the digital Web3 existence that we have, because we all are like chronically online, to actually bringing something IRL. And again, bringing it back to being online, because it was just such a hit on crypto Twitter and people were talking about it for so long. So I think things like that, where again, it's just really stepping out the box of what's done in this space. I think that was really, really cool. I'd love to see more things like that come about.
I think right now in Denver, you're going to Denver, right?
Yes.
I think right now in Denver, POAP does something similar-ish, but you can only use their platform to like to kind of register a meeting that you had with somebody instead of like taking a photo, putting it on Telegram, exactly what people were doing at ETC last summer, which I thought was like much better than what I've seen before. But I think right now, like I saw a post by their partnership manager last night on LinkedIn, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited. Like, I can't wait to use this at the next event I'm going to go to. So
Nice.
keep an eye on that. I'm going to share that with you. Maybe that would be something that you can use. Not as big, it's
Yeah.
not as interesting as a physical product like the nails from Gossip, but definitely something that could be very useful, especially when it comes to like big conferences like this.
Yeah, 100%. Now you say it, I don't think it's Pope, but someone is doing. I can't remember what they're doing, but ENS are doing something pretty cool in Denver as well.
Huge FOMO
Where
now.
huh?
I'm having huge FOMO now.
I know. Well, I had huge FOMO in Istanbul, so I'm glad that I won't be this time. But yeah, ENS are doing something super similar as well. Just again, like bringing the digital into the physical. But yeah, I mean, we are seeing more of this happen. And I think as we come out of the bear and people are more confident to build a bit more, I do think we'll start to see more excitement like this with like physical activations, conferences, which again, to be honest, like the Istanbul piece, that people are still talking about that. That's, I think, there's still activations going on with the chip nails, like today, this week, whatever, as a result of the success of Istanbul. So something like, don't underestimate doing a great IRL activation, because it really has long-term results. And I think that was a really cool, really great example.
The potential. One of the last questions I want to ask you right now, as we're getting close to the end of this episode, is like, if you can give me maybe an example of a tool or resource or anything that you find useful. That's, if it's a Web3 tool, that's even better. Or if it's a resource where the audience can learn from. I don't know, anything you want to share.
I mean, tooling, I would say definitely check out. I'm getting so much sun in my eyes. I'm just going to move over here. Everyone should check out Web3 Inbox. Not to shill my own project, but I think there's a few pieces in this space, right, and a few ways to discuss. What we do as marketing is communicate, right? I think there's a few different tools that I would say for 2024, everyone should be keeping an eye on as ways to bring that communication element into Web3. I think there's the social tools, Lens, Forecaster, also things like Web3 Inbox. People should definitely be kind of having a look and starting to test and try things out. The ultimate goal, again, maybe we're looking at ways to kind of separate or evolve our two Web3 crypto audiences and nurture them as their own two kind of standalone audiences. But definitely, if you are marketing to a Web3 native audience, you should be considering tools that are within the space that allow you to actually market to your Web3 audience with Web3 like native tooling. And I think there's the social tools I've mentioned a few times. And again, definitely have a look at Web3 Inbox, because it's just a whole different experience being able to actually engage your audience within the space.
And obviously make sure that you collect the episode on Pause.media once the episode comes out, yes. Obviously. Before we wrap this up, where can people find you?
So I'm on Forecaster, Amy Wilkes. I'm on Twitter, AmyA_Wilkes. Pretty much only the two tools, trying to keep things lean. I'm one of those people with many numbers in the little red dot on my phone for WhatsApp, personal email, text messages. So sticking to the two.
I will include your info in the description of the episode if anybody wants to connect. Amy, thank you so much for being with me for this episode. It's been a pleasure. Have fun in Denver, and looking forward to talk more about the activations that you're doing there.
Same. Thanks for having me. It was good to chat.
Speak soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to our Out of Ordinary podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you would like to hear more content like this, then open up the podcast app and click on the follow or subscribe button. It takes less than 5 seconds and is the single best thing you can do to support the show and stay up to date to more marketing strategies that are being used in the Web3 space.